First Things, episode number 54.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. Great to have you back with me today as we are continuing our study on essentialism. And I'm very excited about going through this series of study. To tell you the truth, it's very similar to some stuff that Stephen Covey put out many, many years ago while he was still alive. In fact, today I want to play some clips from Stephen Covey where he's talking about first things and about choosing life essentials and about aligning your life against a compass versus a clock and different things like that. And I hope that you will find it very useful as we continue this study. I think this morning my words are all kind of jumbled up and I'm making all sorts of crazy grammatical errors as I'm talking. I think it's because I'm embarking on trying to change up some of my eating habits and diets and things like that. Been reading this amazing book by Jonathan Baylor, who I actually saw first on Creative Live. And you know, I'm a fanatic for Creative Live stuff. They haven't had as many good courses, I don't think, as late. They seem to have changed up some of how they do things or their priority of things. But man, some of their older courses were just amazing to me. And I saw Jonathan Baylor's course about eat more and exercise less, and I found it fascinating. I actually bought it because, you know, I'm a research junkie, and I love hearing about different research-based things. And he bases his whole thing about food and exercise on tremendous amounts of research. And I was highly impressed, and he has a book out called The Calorie Myth, and I've been reading a lot of that. And one of the things he's really big on is making smoothies and drinking lots of green tea, and to the total of like 10 glasses of green tea a day, which is hard. So one of the things that he recommends for people, and green tea can be kind of bitter for me especially, but he recommends you can put it into your smoothie and you won't really taste it. So I did that this morning. I put in about 8 ounces of water that had been steeped with about 5 bags of green tea and drank it, and couldn't taste it. It was actually pretty good, but if I seem a little loopy, it seems like I'm making all sorts of grammatical mistakes in me just talking this morning, so I'm going to blame it on the green tea. Anyway, check out that book. I don't think it's something we'll probably cover in this podcast. Maybe we might do a one-off on it or something like that. I think it's kind of interesting, and I'll let you know kind of how that goes with me as I start doing that. Really trying to talk my family into getting a Vitamix mixer, and those are kind of expensive, even if you buy a refurbished one, about nearly $300, $400, and I just can't convince anyone. I'm thinking, yes, but I'm about to start grinding up 5 cups of spinach into this smoothie, which probably sounds gross, but they swear that you can't taste it, and I kind of believe them because I've tasted other things similar to that. I'm thinking my little GE mixer is just not going to do that. I'm going to end up chewing my smoothie more than drinking my smoothie, but anyway. So we've been talking about the mindset of essentialism, and this is the first part of Greg McKeown's book, where he's basically trying to get us into a paradigm, a worldview, a way of thinking in order to really put into place essentialism in our lives. And last week we covered the very first paradigm, the very first type of thinking you need, the mindset you need, and that is one of individual choice, that we can choose how to spend our energy and time, how we cannot play the victim in life, how we must embrace choice. We must see ourselves as someone who's capable of making choices. Because honestly, if we don't think we do have a choice, then everything else that we talk about is a waste of time, because we'll never be able to implement the most essential things in our lives if we don't feel like we have the choice to do so. So that's the very cornerstone. That's one of the big pillars in really implementing essentialism in our lives. Now, the second thing, which we're talking about today, which is chapter 3 in Essentialism by Greg McKeown, is the prevalence of noise. And that is the fact that almost everything in life is noisy, and there's very few things that are exceptionally valuable. Now, this is a huge pillar we need to really have firmly in place in our lives in order to embrace essentialism. Almost everything in life is noise, and there's very few things that are exceptionally valuable in life. If we really believe that, if we really think this through, this is going to change our decisions in life. This is going to change what we prioritize in life. This is going to change the fact that we many times go on autopilot and we let many things rule us in life and dictate what we do in life, when in fact very few things really matter. We live in a very noisy world, and I don't mean just decibels. people playing their stereos too loud. We live in a world that is constantly bantering for our attention. I'm convinced that although there are many, many atrocities in this world, many injustices in this world, if you're listening to me in real time in August of 2014, there's many things I could give out right now just happened in the last few weeks that are just terrible things that have gone on. And we're so inundated with news because we can get news now 24/7 and no longer just on our TV, but we can get it on our smartphone. We can get automatic updates that pop up on our phone. We can get it through our emails. We can get it through Facebook. It's just all over the place. And we could probably come away with the conclusion that the world is really, really bad, worse than it's ever been. And I'm not even sure that's always the case. I think the world's always been kind of this way, but we hear about it so much quicker now. Back in the old days, if something really bad happened, think back in the days of World War I or World War II with Hitler and people like that. It took a long time for people to sometimes really know what happened. And it was bad back then. It was big atrocities happening to people. It's just that today we can hear about it in minutes. We can almost hear about it in real time, whereas in the old days, it took many, many months sometimes for it to filter through everyone. Anyway, the point is, we live in a society, a world that is constantly bombarding us with messages. You turn on the TV and that is the nature of commercials. You have something wrong with you and you need this. Your life is not complete. You need this. And then we go to work and we think, wow, finally I get away from all this commercialism and TV and Facebook and all this type of stuff. And then we're inundated with meetings constantly at our work or interruptions through instant messages from our bosses or our managers, emails that constantly bombard us during the day. You know, I've told you many, many times how I'm not a fan of meetings. I look at my schedule for last week and I'm telling you that 95% of those meetings at least could have been boiled down to an hour of the entire week. I have one person that insists in meeting with me an hour every single week. And this person is a higher up and they just love to talk. I'm convinced of it because I'm sitting there thinking, you know, everything we talked about, we could have covered in 5 or 10 minutes and gone on with our day. And it's taken an hour to get through all this. This is just crazy. But here's what I want you to think about noise. Think about all the noise in your life, clamoring for your attention, pushing you, prodding you. Now, how much of that noise is really the things that matter most to you in your life? And if you're like me, most of that noise has nothing to do with the things that are important to me in my life. The things that really matter to me, the things that I'm passionate about, they get drowned out by that noise. Those things distract me from my true north. They distract me from the things that I'm passionate about. And the interesting thing about noise, if you think about it through music, for instance, is that the noise can drown out the music if you're not careful. And it's quite irritating if you're trying to listen to music and there's noise going on at the same time. I mean, this is why headphone makers like Bose make a lot of money selling headphones that cancel out the noise. Why do they market it? Hey, put this on while you're in the airplane and it will cut a lot of that noise out, because people want to get rid of the noise, especially when it comes to listening to music and things like that. But we never take that all the way over into the other areas of our life and all the other types of noise that we have in life. Then we mistakenly think that everything in life has to be important. And, you know, I think if we pressed ourselves with that thought, none of us would probably believe that, but many of us live our lives as if that was the case. We react to everything, and we don't deliberately try to push out the noise in our life. Therefore, by default, we're basically saying that everything is important in life, when actually, if we really think about it hard, there are very few things that are very valuable in our lives. Almost everything else in our lives are noise, and they are distractors, and they are compromises to the best things that we could be doing in our lives. We settle for the good things. Things that are okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but they don't fulfill us, and we end up being very frustrated in life because we have basically let noise dominate our lives. So chapter 3 of the book starts out with this quote by Richard Koch. It says, "Most of what exists in the universe, our actions and all other forces, resources, and ideas, has little value and yields little result. On the other hand, a few things work fantastically well and have tremendous impact." We can be fed a message that we just need to be strong, we need to work harder about things, and when we have setbacks, we need to work longer and harder because of that. We are presented with new challenges, and our automatic default answer is, yes, I can take this on as well. We never step back and say, wait a minute, is this really what I should be investing my time in? Is this really something that adds to my life, or is this nothing but noise? Is this nothing but a distraction? But we have this work ethic many times where we say, get in there and yes, take on some more. Is that all you've got? Give me some more. Give me some more. I can take it. Give me this. I can run with it. and we never think about what's really most important. I've used this illustration by Stephen Covey many times before, where he talks about climbing the ladder of success. And he says, wouldn't it be horrible to climb the ladder of success rung by rung by rung, to only reach the top and realize that that ladder was leaning on the wrong wall the entire time? Many times we get on this ladder and we just start climbing it, and we're determined to take on more and do more and work longer, work harder, and never ask ourselves if the ladder is even leaning on the right wall to begin with. Are we really prioritizing the best things in our life, the things that really matter, the things that really are the most important? And again, we're going to say that this new paradigm of this new way of thinking for us is to start seeing life that there are very few things that are really important. And unfortunately, I can't give you the list of what those things are. I think it does depend upon the person. I think in general, for most of us, relationships are front and center in the things that we can neglect that are probably the most important in our lives, whether that be relationships on the job or family or children or, things like that. But still then, what really resonates with you may not resonate with me, and vice versa. For instance, I love writing music, but that may not be something that resonates with you. But we could put it under a bigger umbrella maybe of creativity, and maybe you are creative in writing a book or in creating a new recipe or in helping someone in a unique way. And all of that falls under creativity. So I think the higher we go, the more aggregate we go in this, we can find some common themes there. But specifically, what is your signal versus your noise is going to be different than it is for me. Greg says this in his book. He says, after all, we have been taught from a young age that hard work is key to producing results. And many of us have been amply rewarded for our productivity and our ability to muscle through every task or challenge the world throws at us. Yet for capable people who are already working hard, are there limits to the value of hard work? Is there a point at which doing more does not produce more? Is there a point at which doing less but thinking more will actually produce better outcomes? And the answer to that question is yes. It's not something that many of us realize by default, because it sounds kind of opposite of what we think hard work is all about, being choosy about what we do, because we realize that there's not value in everything that we could do. We talked about this before, say with Apple, Steve Jobs. Yeah, you can go into many of his interviews where he talks about the fact that they've had many, many great ideas that they've never done anything with because they realized they weren't the best ideas and they wanted to only do the best things that they could do. Greg talks about Warren Buffett, who is this extremely rich millionaire, billionaire probably, who invests and has all these amazing ways to invest in money. And he talks about how some people have investigated how Warren Buffett does this, and he doesn't invest in thousands of different things. He has about 10 things that he's focused on, and that's it. It's very simple. It's very narrow. We should ask ourselves, what is the most valuable result I could achieve in this job? And we're not saying that working hard is unimportant. It is important, but more effort doesn't necessarily give us better results or more results. Remember our mantra from last week, less but better. This has to be front and center in our thinking when we approach life. We want to do less but better things in life. Not more and good things, less but better things in our life. Here's another quote from Greg McKeown in the book. He says, getting used to the idea of less but better may prove harder than it sounds, especially when we have been rewarded in the past for doing more and more and more. Yet at a certain point, more effort causes our progress to plateau and even stall. It's true that the idea of a direct correlation between results and effort is appealing. It seems fair, yet research across many fields paints a different picture. We must learn to distinguish between the trivial many and the vital few. In fact, I would encourage you to take out a piece of paper. This could be homework for this class, for this particular series of the podcast. Take out a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. In the top left, write trivial many, the trivial many. And in the top right, I want you to write the words vital few. And if you want to make this even more interesting, on the left, you're going to write a list of things, and I want you to maybe put down the numbers 1 through 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just number it all the way down to 20. And then on the right side, under the vital few, I only want you to write the numbers 1 through 5. And basically what you're going to do in this list, in fact, on the back side of that page, you may want to just write down everything you do in life. So what do you do in life? From the time that you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed, write down everything you do. So I get up, I eat, I go to work, I do this, I have this project, I have these certain tasks I have to do, I have to take my kids to this, I do this with them. Just write down everything you do, and then also include things you want to do, things that really are passionate about. Like if you enjoy cooking, then write that down. If you want to do music, write that down. Write down everything that really resonates with you. If you love watching movies, and write that down. Just put all this stuff down, and then take that list and go back to the other side of the page and start determining how many of those things would you consider to be trivial and how many of those would you consider to be vital. And if it helps you to think through this, then think through that list and think, okay, I only have 1 year to live in life, or maybe I only have 6 months to live in my life. Which one of these would I now consider to be vital, and which ones would I consider to be trivial? And it may be amazing that you see some clarity in that list when you present yourself with that option. For example, if you think you have 50 years left to live, taking your kid to a softball game might actually not be as important as if you think you only had 6 months to live. And I'm not going to tell you how your list should look like. I'm just saying that when you put it in the context that you may not have but a few months left on this earth to do things, it may help you bring some clarity to the things that are trivial and the things that are vital. The reason why we put more numbers under the trivial is because of this paradigm we're talking about today. Many, many, many things in our lives are really not that important. And they will scream at us and they will make us believe they are vitally important, and they're not. They are trivial. There are very few things that are vital. And the goal that we are after in this exercise is to try to figure out what are the most vital things to us, because they will be unique to us, and we must know what those are. Another good thing this exercise does is it forces us to realize that everything is not vital. And we need that paradigm shift in our lives. We need to really drill into our minds the fact that there are lots of things in this world and in my life, and most of them really are not that important. Greg McEwen says this: the overwhelming reality is we live in a world where almost everything is worthless and a very few things are exceptionally valuable. As John Maxwell has written, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. So as we look over our world, our environment, for those really important things, those vital few things, we start to learn, as we're going to get into future weeks, how we can eagerly start eliminating the trivial many things. That's the only time we can truly say no to the good opportunities in order to say yes to the great opportunities. If we've never really thought about what are the really great things, the vital things in my life, I'm going to have a hard time saying no to the good things. Because remember, we're not talking about choosing between the bad and the good things. We're talking about choosing between the best and the good things. And it's going to feel really odd. It's going to feel strange to say no to good things. And if you don't know what the vital things are, you may never be able to say no to the good things, because you're not going to have an understanding of why you should be saying no to good things in the first place. I've said this many times in the past. I should copyright it or put it in a book at some point. Your most powerful no is a well-defined yes. Your most powerful no is a well-defined yes. In other words, when you really know what you want to say yes to, it's going to be that much easier to say no to things. We've got to explore all our options. And here's how Greg ends up this chapter. He says, an essentialist, in other words, discerns more so he can do less. The non-essentialist, he thinks almost everything is essential. He views opportunities as basically equal, but an essentialist thinks almost everything is non-essential, and he distinguishes the vital few from the trivial many. Many capable people are kept from getting to the next level of contribution because they can't let go of the belief that everything is important. But an essentialist has learned to tell the difference between what is truly important and everything else. To practice this essentialist skill, we can start at a simple level, and once it becomes second nature for everyday decisions, we can begin to apply it to bigger and broader areas of our personal and our professional lives. To master it fully will require a massive shift in thinking, but it can be done. Now, I want to play you a clip from Stephen Covey about putting first things first. And I think it will be beneficial as kind of a wrap-up of what we're talking about here. And then after he talks about this, then we'll come back and we'll close up this particular episode.
What are the first things to you? What are the most significant, the most important things to you? Assuming you were told that you had only a short while to live, what would you think about doing with the rest of your life? Assuming also that you were staying involved in your professional work or in your present activities. Or perhaps you'd want to change your professional work or your present activities, but you needed to make a livelihood. What would you do with the rest of your life? In other words, I'm asking you to think about the ultimate questions. Now, a follow-up secondary question would be, what keeps you from keeping those first things first? Think about it. Or are you keeping them first? Perhaps you feel like you are. Perhaps you're struggling. You know what we found in doing research among those who have studied the 7 Habits material and really got involved in it? And we've gathered data from survey research on these individuals. This represents over 50,000 managers. You know what habit had the lowest marks universally? Habit 3, first things first. That's one of the reasons we brought out the book, First Things First, when we did. The data was clear that most people kind of inwardly know what they should do, what they should put first, but they don't do it. They seem to be often distracted by other forces in the environment or in their habit patterns or the social agendas of their life, whatever. They get uprooted, and then they begin to experience this inward feeling of loss, this inward emptiness, this void, and it often becomes pervasive. There's a kind of feeling that perhaps my ladder is not leaning against the right wall. But I suggest the fundamental problem is we have a wrong-headed solution, and it is adding to the problem itself. It is a bad paradigm. Paradigm is one of my favorite words. It is a mental map. Some people call it a model, a theoretical explanation, a view of life, a pair of glasses. You could use many different symbols. It's essentially, what is life to you? In other words, how do you see it? I was visiting with a very prominent executive. In fact, he was the number 2 person in a major international corporation. I will never forget the setting. We had just concluded a morning seminar, and he wanted to visit. He was so anxious to get at his basic question, what to do with his own life. I asked him what the problem was, and he immediately responded, "My life has a hole in it. I feel an inward kind of sickness. I have given myself so diligently for so many years to my career that I feel like I have lost the childhood of my children, that I was just not there for them. I was not around enough. And even when I was around and rationalized in the name of quality time and giving them things," he said, "I knew it was not sufficient. When I was home, my mind wasn't home, my heart wasn't home. I was going through the motions. My mind was consumed. I was completely preoccupied with all that was happening, which was exciting, which was very challenging, and which seemed extremely meaningful. But now," he said, "I just feel this enormous void. I feel this emptiness. And you know what? My 3 kids feel the same thing. We've even talked about it together, and we're heartsick about it. All of us would like to, in some way, recover what we have lost." And he said, "Stephen, when you were talking this morning about climbing a ladder of success, and then getting to the top rung, or perhaps near the top rung, discovering at that time that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall, it hit me most forcibly. It brought all of this to the surface, and that's why I wanted to visit with you. But you know, let me tell you something." And then you could see the excitement in his eyes. You could see his fire. And he pulled out from underneath the booth where he was sitting a blueprint of a home that he was building on the beach in Savannah, Georgia. And it was an intergenerational home. And he wanted to build it for his children and for their children. It was a grandchildren's home. And he was involving his children in the process of designing it. And they were excited, and he was excited. And the mutual excitement between them was synergistic. It created a kind of new life, a new sense of something is happening in our family that has not been there before. He said, "I just can't get my head out of it. So if they offer me the job, if they invite me to be the CEO, I'll say one thing for sure. If I'm required to move to the new headquarters, I will not take the job. This other thing's too important to me. If they allow me to stay here in this home, where we have so much hope and so much optimism and excitement, then I'll look at it again. But even then, I will look at it in an entirely different way. I'll organize my life in a different way because this is simply too important to me. I am not going to lose this again.
Now let's quickly review. Habit 1, be proactive, is the awareness that you are the programmer. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is where you write the program. Habit 3 is where you run it. In other words, you execute around it. The third habit is to put first things first. The opposite of habit 3, to put first things first, is to put second or third things first, or to put first things second. In a sense, you become bogged down in what is called the thick of thin things. Goethe said it this way: things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. Now, habit 3, put first things first, is the test of our integrity. Can we walk by those first things? You see, in a very real sense, the second habit, begin with the end in mind, decides what the first things are. And the third habit, put first things first, is that habit of our discipline and our commitment to live by those first things. Thus, it is the habit of integrity, the habit of keeping our lives integrated. In other words, we walk our talk. That's the real challenge and the true test of our integrity and our maturity. Habit 3 would be the management principle of putting first things first, where habit 2 is the leadership principle in deciding what the first things are. In other words, in habit 3, you organize and execute around the priorities you decided on in habit 2. Now, essentially, habit 3, to put first things first, is the paradigm or way of thinking which focuses upon relationships rather than schedules. Why? Because people in relationships are the first things, and almost all people will come to that. The traditional paradigm or way of thinking in the field of time management has always dealt with time, with scheduling, with control, with efficiency. That is, doing more things faster. You see, that paradigm is focused on efficiency and control. It is called time management. You manage your time. The clock is its symbol. It drives us toward efficiency. Have you ever tried to be efficient with a loved one on a tough issue? How did it go? You ever do it with your spouse? How did it go? You ever do it with a difficult teenage situation? How did that one go? You see, right off the bat, you already know how foolish it is. But look at the paradigm that drives it. When it doesn't work, what do? We try to do it better. We try to do it more efficiently, more quickly. Now, the paradigm I'm trying to teach is symbolized by a compass, not a clock. And it is based upon a sense of focusing upon the first things in our lives. And they're always relationships. This is also true in business. Relationships with customers, associates, and so forth. And the essence of all effectiveness basically deals with people and with relationships. And ultimately, these are governed by a moral sense of principles, that is, of what is right and what is wrong, and of integrity around those principles. This requires all of us to be sufficiently open and humble to just get into this kind of pair of glasses, this new frame of reference, this new paradigm, this new map that is based upon relationships, not schedules, based upon principles, not values, based upon leadership first, then management, based upon a compass, and then a clock. A good practical way of doing this is to write down on a piece of paper what to you are the most important things, the first things in your life, the supremely important things. Now, we're speaking of things in a generic sense, such as people, relationships, family, health, integrity, service, and so forth. What are your first things? Just list 5 or 6. This takes real deep thinking because you have to prioritize. In fact, you may wish to even pause this program momentarily while you do this little exercise. Now think of one activity in your work or professional life that you know that if you did it superbly well and consistently would produce marvelous results. In other words, think of activities in your personal and your work life that help us to secure the first things you've already identified. Now that you've written down what the first things are, and you've written down what is the one activity in your personal and in your work life that you absolutely know that if you did it superbly well, you would produce marvelous results, study that. Most of you put down in your first things your family, your loved ones. I know you did. I've done this all over the world, and that's what most people put down. You'll also find that you also wrote down about the same activities that would produce marvelous results. You'd focus on preparation, on prevention, on value clarification, on planning, on relationship building, on deep communication with the key people in your lives. You may have used different words, but the underlying meanings are almost always the same, everywhere. The point that we're trying to get across here is that we shift to this new paradigm, which is a way of thinking based upon principles and relationships, rather than things and schedules. In other words, based on leadership first, then management. Based on relationships first, then schedules. Based upon a compass, then a clock. Now, if you take out the little guide that came with the program, you'll see a chart in there showing 4 quadrants I call the time management matrix. The key words to understand are importance and urgency. Importance basically comes from within you. Importance is your value system, hopefully based on principles. Importance is your mission, your central strategy to accomplish those high priority goals, and the plans to implement that strategy. Urgency comes from the environment. It presses upon you. It's proximate, it's right in front of you. And it's often very popular. It could be deep into a social value system. It's urgent. It has the appearance of requiring immediate attention. Now you have to decide what is truly important in your life. That's why I asked you. Now notice the question. What are the most important things to you, your first things? And then I asked, what are the single activities that you know without any question that by doing those consistently, superbly well, you'd accomplish marvelous results? See, you've identified what's important. Now, quadrant 1, you'll notice, is both urgent and important. These are usually called problems or crises, putting out fires. Sometimes these quadrant 1 activities are deadline-driven. So it's either a present problem or a problem in the making if you neglect it. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, but it is important. Prevention is not urgent. But is that important? Very important? Critically important? Absolutely. So quadrant 2 would include prevention, as well as preparation, planning, relationship building, empowerment, self-development, developing mission statements, and the like. You see, quadrant 2 is the leadership quadrant. Now, quadrant 3 is not important, but it is urgent. It includes many proximate pressing matters and many popular activities, interruptions, other people's expectations. So all these quadrant 3 activities are not important, but they have the appearance of urgency. Finally, quadrant 4 is neither urgent or important. This usually includes irrelevant phone calls and mail, busy work, time wasters such as excessive TV, and so, again, quadrant 4 is neither urgent nor important. All right, now, looking at your paper and looking at your answers to those 2 questions, what quadrant were those answers in? What would you say? It had to be either 1 or 2, but why is almost every answer in 2? Because you're not doing them. And why? Because they're not urgent. The whole popular culture has so defined urgency as important that we end up neglecting that which is important but not urgent. Relationship building, deep communication with the key people at home and at work, planning, preparation, getting a clear sense of mission, of priorities, etc. In fact, you examine most executive agendas, most agendas of any meeting, against the 4 quadrants, and you'll find almost all of them are quadrants 1 and 3. Quadrant 2 is usually called other business. And what happens to it? It gets pushed aside by quadrants 1 and 3. So where do you get time for quadrant 2 when you're inundated by quadrant 1 things that are both important and urgent? You neglect quadrants 3 and 4. You literally, smilingly neglect them. Those things which are not important, you literally say no. Because things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. You'll have the power to do this quadrant 2 work, when there is a burning yes inside you about your mission and purpose and value system. You can literally say no to all kinds of unimportant, however urgent, other things may be. A phone call comes up. Could you come to this business meeting? I would like to, however, I have a prior commitment. Even if that commitment is to yourself for planning or preparing or preventing. When people sense your quadrant 2 orientation, they'll begin to see you differently.
I've always enjoyed Stephen Covey, and I hope that you enjoyed what he talked about here about putting first things first, about prioritizing things. And he talked a little bit in there about how relationships for many of us are going to be first things. They're going to be really compass things in our lives, not flock type things. Those true quadrant 2 activities, things that are important but not urgent, where really the flavor of life happens. Not the urgent things that clamor for our attention and distract us away from the important but non-urgent things. If you've never seen Stephen Covey's quadrants before, I actually have a picture of this very thing and talk about this a little bit more in episode number 4 of First Things. If you go to firstthingsproductivity.com/04, you will go to my episode called Slaves to the Tyranny of the Urgent, the constant battle between the important and the urgent. And we talk about this in that episode a lot. I would encourage you to listen to that episode, where I actually give you 16-item tests to determine the impact of urgency in your life. We talk about technology being a friend or foe, how we secretly love the urgent. I actually talk about the 4 quadrants that Stephen Covey mentioned that aren't original to him. I can't remember who originally did that. Maybe Eisenhower, somebody like that did that. And I actually have a picture on that page. If you scroll down, there's actually a picture of the 4 quadrants, and we talk about that. I actually talk about the 4 quadrants as Star Wars characters in that particular episode as well. So go check that out if you want to hear a little bit more about the 4 quadrants that Stephen Covey was talking about, and this whole issue of important but not urgent, which is basically parallel to what we read about from Greg McEwen in the Essentialism book. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode on Essentialism, the second pillar, the mindset that there are vital few things in life that we should focus on, not everything being important, most of the things being noise in our life, and for us to distinguish what those things are, plus also changing our mindset to realizing that not everything in our life is important, and therefore we must put dedicated focus on the things that are vitally few in our lives. As always, please consider leaving me a rating, comment on iTunes. It would just help let others know about this show, and I would greatly appreciate any help that you can give me in that area. I realize that some of you don't listen to me on iTunes, and I thank you so much for listening to me. However you may be listening to me through Stitcher or anything like that, I just greatly appreciate that. You may be listening to me on my web page as well, and definitely thank you for doing that. Again, if you have any comments for me, feel free to go to my discussion area at firstthingsproductivity.com/54 as in episode 54. You can also reach out to me on Facebook and Twitter as well. And until next time, remember this. Instead of thinking that almost everything is essential in your life, instead of viewing all opportunities as basically equal in your life, embrace today that almost everything is non-essential in your life. And our goal is to distinguish the vital few from the trivial many in our lives. So embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.